I'm Chance Dorland, and this is The Docket, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio from expressnews.com. Brought to you today by the law offices of Pat Maloney. And joined now, as I am every week, by San Antonio Express News courts reporter Elizabeth Zavala. Great to have you back here on the program. Elizabeth, let's get right to it. Lots to talk about the case we're discussing today. A lot of people might be familiar with a viral video having to do with this case.
Yes. This is a really interesting case that happened in San Antonio last summer. This is Hunter Richard, was 16 years old, the kid from Orlando who was visiting friends in San Antonio last July. And they were eating around 2 a.m. at a Whataburger on the north side of San Antonio at Nacogdoches and Thousand Oaks. And the story made national headlines because part of the encounter was captured in a cell phone video that went viral on the internet. As the boys were eating, a man went up to their table and confronted Hunter about his cap, a Make America Great Again cap. And the video begins halfway through an altercation that captured a man suspected of being Kino Jimenez, throwing a drink in Richard's face and walking out of the restaurant with the red Make America Great Again cap in his hand that Hunter Richard later told authorities that belonged to him. As the man suspected of being Jimenez left the restaurant, he can be heard uttering a curse word and a racial epithet, and also something to the effect that that cap was going to go really well in his fireplace. So needless to say, the encounter left the boys rattled because Jimenez at the time is still 30 years old. This happened in July. 30 years old, and Hunter Richard, 16. So, in fact, in this seconds-long video, Hunter's friend can be seen looking pretty shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you're in your late teens and especially, you said 2 a.m. At a public, fast food type of restaurant and this happens to you, I could see how that would really not be something that you would suspect. And then let alone have that video go viral and be such a national conversation item.
Right.
So, of course, that was the case. We're still talking about it now, but it wasn't very long before Jimenez was involved with the authorities, correct?
Right, yes. About a day or two later, San Antonio Police Robbery Task Force officers found him in Universal City, which isn't very far from San Antonio, and they arrested him on a charge of theft of person. And Jimenez has been out on bond since that arrest.
So, of course, if this had happened, just the same exact circumstances, this might have been a story that, we would have covered in San Antonio, might have got some play in Texas, the region, that type of thing. But as we keep pointing to this video, this wasn't only something that people were sharing on social media. I mean, this got to the person who created those hats in general.
You're right. You bring up a really good point. Had this been in San Antonio, had this been a Spurs cap or maybe more like a LA Lakers cap but really, if this would have been any other type of cap, we probably wouldn't be talking about this today. But the story went viral because this seconds-long video ended up appearing in national and international, websites and publications. Even the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., and President Trump's 2020 campaign manager, Brad Parscale, tweeted about this, about how, disgusting it is that, you can't wear a political statement from an opposing party. Both sides could argue that at any point, I imagine, but it doesn't seem like it's really reached the level as it has, this particular time.
And especially involving minors. Not to say that Jimenez is particularly old, around 30. That's pretty young for a lot of people still. But these were not adults. These were minors eating at a type of fast food restaurant. To have this happen to them, as you mentioned, shock was something that was described from their standpoint. To have this happen, to have this create such a national discussion, then of course now what we're talking about, the legal ramifications, and there's been an indictment. Tell me about that, Elizabeth.
Well, yes, this particular incident happened, in July, and Jimenez was actually indicted Wednesday last week, and he was formally charged Friday. And at this point, he has a tentative court date of October 19th in the 187th State District Court, which is presided by Judge Joey Contreras.
So let's get back to that original charge that he was arrested for just a couple days after that video was filmed. Theft of person. Tell me what that means.
It is a state jail felony. If Jimenez, if this indeed was Jimenez, and if he would have given the cap back, this wouldn't even be an issue. But theft of person, taking something from someone else, is a state jail felony, and it's punishable by a minimum of 6 months or a maximum of 2 years in state jail. Now, Jimenez has a criminal record that includes only misdemeanor offenses for things like marijuana possession and driving while intoxicated, according to Bexar County court records. But, at this point, Jimenez has no felony convictions. So if he does go to trial, he would be eligible for probation or deferred adjudication, other pre-trial programs, intervention type programs, if he is found guilty because he has no felony convictions.
Now, Elizabeth, I'll be the first to completely be open and honest about the fact that I'm not a lawyer and I don't have a huge background in this, but it seems shocking to me that the term felony would come up for what seems like a simple theft. Like if I stole someone's phone, which would certainly be more expensive than a Make America Great Again hat, I could be charged with a state jail felony in Texas?
Yes, you can, apparently. And, I think other things come into mind, come into play on this too, because, the video is shot from, it appears to be shot from the vantage point of the person who was wearing the cap. And again, it's captured already halfway through the altercation. But, you're talking 16-year-olds and a 30-year-old man. And, kids sitting down at a table and a man, leaving. I mean, it's pretty, if you look at the video, it seems like he just grabbed that right off of his head and said some stuff and walked right out of it. So, I think that, when you do it in that particular vein, it may have a little something that makes it that sort of, conviction.
Yeah, it certainly might be up to the people who are involved, the discretion, as we've talked about, in plenty of cases that we've discussed here on the Docket podcast. This is really a cautionary tale for everyone. This is definitely what you should not be doing. But as you really, I think, correctly pointed out, had this been any other type of hat or something else, we probably wouldn't be talking about this, even if there had been a video and all of the same actions had been, more or less the same actions had taken place. This is really pointing to political division that's certainly in Texas and, of course, across the rest of the country.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, cautionary tale is exactly what it is. And oh my gosh, if my teenage nephew was hearing this right now, he would probably, just cover his ears, because I'm always saying to him, in fact, we were talking about this yesterday, that, at this point in America, where the political divisions in Washington have spilled out onto Main Street, main streets across America, across the country, you've got to really, really watch it. In the San Antonio case, you have, as you mentioned earlier, we have a grown man seen on a video appearing to verbally assault teenagers in a restaurant while they were eating over a cap with a political statement. Man 30 versus teen 16. And this man, and again, he is innocent until proven guilty, but he has already lost his part-time job over this. Now, we're unclear if there was any other employment affected. But plus, if Jimenez is convicted of this state jail felony, he's going to have that on his record, along with those other misdemeanor convictions. And as everybody should know, unless, you live under a rock or, you don't watch TV or read the news, prospective employers look at everything from social media profiles to criminal records. And not to mention the fact, really, Chance, that this could have ended tragically as well. I mean, how many cases have you and I talked about where, a drug deal turned into a fatality, or turned into a fatal, killing, where you've got, teenagers who face, capital murder charges because they were trying to make a drug deal with somebody, and then they ended up deciding to rob them, and they killed somebody, and then suddenly they're facing either life in prison without the possibility of parole or, a death sentence. So, employers look at everything. And, on that other aspect of it, you can't get a job or you can't get a meaningful job if you have any sort of criminal record. So, again, we've seen lesser things happen that have ended with multiple. So, I guess, one could say that this is one of those things where, you collectively breathe a sigh of relief, even though somebody's going to be facing, the potential of up to 2 years in state jail.
You're listening to The Docket, a new weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio from expressnews.com, brought to you by our sponsor, the law offices of Pat Maloney. It's interesting because, as you correctly point out, Jimenez innocent until proven guilty, though it does appear to have what you'd assume would be him on the video. Otherwise, you'd think the arrests and all this wouldn't have taken place. But of course, trial, all those things, that's the process, respect it. That's, the American way. But that all being the case, has there been any messaging coming from this accused person, his lawyer, anyone from his side? Has there been any release of information, or are they being quiet after all the other information that's gone viral from this case?
Actually, yes. The teen, Hunter Richard, told the Express News in a story by mysanantonio.com reporter Caleb Downs after this incident occurred that he would have had no problem, discussing his political differences with Jimenez because, I believe he told Caleb at the time that he understands and that he has friends. And in fact, the friend who was with him at that restaurant that day also told Caleb that, he doesn't really have the same sort of political beliefs as the friend he was dining with, but, yet they were there. They were at the restaurant. They were having, having burgers together and, talking. And, and there have been some other things that have come out. There have been, some rumblings that there possibly had been some sort of, conversation overheard that prompted, this particular thing to go down at this restaurant. But, to have someone actually say, okay, I don't agree with your political beliefs. And to have someone like Hunter Richard say to Caleb, Downs, the reporter, that, I would welcome a conversation. I want, to know what this man feels differently about so that, we can discuss our differences and our ideas. But, the Hunter Richard, at the end of the day, should be able to, support his president and wear his cap, because that's what the First Amendment is supposed to allow for us to do, to express ourselves.
But of course, that conversation never took place. I mean, there's been no information from the defendant, the accused, and his people. They haven't made any statements about anything. They haven't denied that it was him. Has there been any information from his side of things?
Not at this point that I've been able to glean. This is pretty early in the process right now, with the indictment happening on Wednesday, and then on Friday the arraignment. Again, the teenager lives in Orlando. So I imagine that, as things get closer to this October date, a couple of things could happen. I mean, this could go to trial, and if that happens, because the teenager was involved, he would likely have to be here for that, to tell his side of the story. His friend who lives here in San Antonio likely will be asked as well, so that they can be able to get their word over those of Mr. Jimenez. And plus, there is also a video that likely will be shown in court if this indeed goes to trial. So, sometimes when you have the trial setting in a lot of the cases that I've seen, and of course, we've talked about a lot of really heinous murder cases here. Victim impact statements usually occur in those situations, and sometimes you end up hearing things from the other side where they will say, I forgive you for what has happened. There are other times that you end up, getting, the relative of a victim who was killed, they'll look at somebody and say, I hope you go to hell, or, they could say really horrible things to you. So in this particular case, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think I have ever covered a state jail felony theft case, but this one would be interesting specifically because of the national and international interest. So, this could very well be a very interesting case to come and see and follow.
Yeah, and something we'll definitely be talking about. This is my prediction, definitely be talking about on future episodes of the Docket podcast. So I think that's where we're going to leave it today. Elizabeth, of course, thank you to San Antonio Express News courts reporter Elizabeth Zavala. Join me once again for today's episode of the Docket. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll talk to you in about another 7 days.
Okay, thanks, Chance. Take care.
And that'll do it for today's episode of the Docket Podcast, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio from expressnews.com. Brought to you today by the law offices of Pat Felony. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.